In this video, we are going to cover the pros and cons of living in Seattle. My name is Christian Harris. I run the C-Town real estate team here in Seattle. I live, work, and play right here in the city and have for many years. I'm not going to waste your time with a long introduction video or insult your intelligence on how to subscribe to my channel on YouTube. If you're watching this, you know how YouTube works. All the details about this video and how to get a hold of me if you're looking to move to or relocate to Seattle can be found down in the description section below. So the pros and cons of living in Seattle. Seattle is really fairly small geographically for the world-class city that it is. I like to say that Seattle is a small city with a big heart. Seattle proper is only about 83 square miles, and in 2021, Seattle had roughly 750,000 people, 775,000, and the larger Seattle metro area roughly 3.5 million people, making it the 13th most populated area in the country. With Seattle being nestled up in the very northwest corner of the country, surrounded by wilderness, it can feel secluded and isolated from the rest of the country. Some people like that. Seattle is by far the largest city within 1,000 miles. But one thing that is very unique about the city of Seattle compared to other large cities, if you've flown into many other big cities around the country like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, you'll notice that it really looks like the entire planet is covered in concrete when flying into these places. By contrast with flying into Seattle, where you get an up-close flyby of the majestic Mount Rainier surrounded by forests, you can almost miss the city of Seattle between the greenery, mountains, and water. Seattle attracts transplants from all over the country and the world, making it a melting pot for food, art, and culture. So you may ask, what sort of feel does that give Seattle? It has a laid-back and casual lifestyle with a vibrant culture, world-class attractions, music, art, and museums. Some of the obvious ones, tourist attractions, if you will, are the Space Needle, Pike Place Market, which has the first Starbucks in it, the historic Smith Tower, SAM, or the Seattle Art Museum, and the Museum of Flight. Music is a large part of Seattle's culture, and so there are tons of great music venues, from the historic Paramount and Moore Theater to more upscale establishments like the Triple Door or Benaroya Hall, to the dozens of local staples like the Showbox, Nectar Lounge, and Numos. And of course, there are multiple outdoor amphitheaters for the larger shows, like the George Amphitheater in Eastern Washington or White River. I feel totally spoiled for all of the amazing shows I've had the opportunity to see while here in the Seattle area. If you're interested to know what my favorite shows were, favorite bands that I've seen, go ahead and leave a comment below and I will make sure to answer those. Restaurants, coffee, wine, seafood, breweries galore. It has all of it. For example, one hip neighborhood in North Seattle, Ballard, has 15 breweries within walking distance, and they're all pretty darn amazing. If wine is more your thing, head across Lake Washington to Woodinville, Washington's wine capital with over 100 wineries. Of course, the actual vineyards are in Eastern Washington, where the climate and soil conditions are ideal for growing grapes and apples for that matter. Seattle is also a dream city for foodies, from delicious local burger shacks to upscale dining experiences, and with Seattle being such an international city, you can get any type of ethnic food your heart desires, and it's all amazing. If you want to take advantage of all the fun and quirky restaurants Emerald City has to offer, expect to pay on average about $16 for a meal in an inexpensive restaurant. For a mid-level restaurant, expect to pay about $80 for two people, not including appetizers and drinks. Drinks substantially increases the price. For comparison, dining out in San Francisco is about 5 to 10% more expensive. So if you're moving from the Bay Area, you're winning both in terms of affordable housing and food. So the great outdoor, there's so much to explore there. We got mountains, sea, and temperate rainforests, hiking, backpacking, and skiing in the Cascade Mountains. That's the mountain range that separates eastern and western Washington, going from Canada down through Oregon. So that mountain range has all sorts of wildlife and hiking and backpacking, and this mountain range includes Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, Mount St. Helens. The closest ski lifts to Seattle are only about an hour away at the summit at Snoqualmie, which also includes Alpental, which is renowned. There's also Stevens Pass up Highway 2 to the north and White Pass up Highway 12 to the south, which is just 12 miles outside of Mount Rainier National Park. There's also the Olympic Mountains on the Olympic Peninsula, which is just a couple-hour drive or a short ferry ride from Seattle. This is the body of land that separates Seattle from the ocean and is great for weekend getaway, camping, backpacking, or relaxing in the natural hot springs. There's also plenty of ocean, lake, and river recreation, from kayaking to fishing to boating, even scuba diving or crabbing in the Puget Sound. Or you can stay close to Seattle. Seattle is a very bike-friendly city with tons of dedicated bike lanes and bike paths through the city and various neighborhoods. Jobs is also a very big pro for Seattle. It's a large part of why so many people have come to call Seattle home for over the years, and historically has had a strong job market, which is still booming. There's a lot of tech and big players in the area like Amazon, Microsoft, T-Mobile, Starbucks, Costco, Expedia, Alaska Airlines is headquartered here. And one of the other benefits related to money and jobs is there's no income tax. If a career in the great outdoors is for you, there's so many opportunities here as well, from park ranger to dozens of other outdoor guides to ski and snowboard instructors. The climate and temperature is also a big plus for the area. The summer is absolutely amazing. Warm sunshine, light breeze, maybe you'll hit 80 degrees, no humidity. It lasts about 3 months from July through September. And with so many rivers, lakes, and creeks, there's no shortage of clean water in our lush, green, cool paradise here. This also makes our electricity some of the most affordable in the country, with so much hydroelectric power. So come here for the reprieve from your droughts, water shortages, and expensive electricity. I'm looking at you, California residents. But what about all that rain? Let me let you in on a little secret. While Seattle and the Great Northwest in general has a reputation for rain, Seattle's rainfall is actually less than the national average, which is 38 inches a year, and only 4.5 inches of snowfall per year, thanks to the temperate, mild climate due to being so close to the ocean. So while the actual amount of rainfall a year is not that much, the number of cloudy and rainy days is fairly high compared to the rest of the country. So 155 days here versus 106 days in the rest of the country. So while it's cloudy and misty fairly often, the heavy rainfall is quite rare, and the 3 months of clear and sunny summers are absolute paradise. So people in Seattle, in my experience, they're super friendly and helpful. You never know who you might meet. Living in a big, diverse city always has me on my toes regarding the possibilities of meeting new people, where they're going to be from, different cultures they come from. But if you are an introvert, maybe you chalk this up under the con category if you just don't like meeting interesting people. And Seattle has Facebook groups for literally everything, and buy nothing groups where people offer up free stuff to each other. There's also free and cheap tool libraries around town for your home improvement needs. And it seems like there's neighborhood roadside book libraries everywhere. Those little give a book, take a book, mailbox looking things that you find in different neighborhoods while you're on walks. But what about the Seattle freeze, you might ask, if you've heard of that thing, Seattle freeze. That people have different experiences. I find that if you expect people to be cold and distant, you'll find that. If you expect people to be warm and inviting, you'll find those people. There's very few native-born people in Seattle, and largely due to so many people being from out of area due to the abundance of high-paying jobs. I think maybe it's common for people initially to want to keep to themselves. Now, you may not necessarily have the same neighborly warmth or overt friendliness that I've experienced when I've lived in places like the Midwest or the South, but no matter where you move, you have to be willing to put yourself out there, make the first move, and find people that share the same interests and hobbies as you, get involved in your neighborhood and community, just put yourself out there. So speaking of, there are so many different types of neighborhoods here in Seattle and the surrounding areas. We'll just go over a couple of different types. There's something for everyone here. You can hang with the hipsters in North Seattle's Ballard or Wallingford area, or you can chill in sleepy West Seattle. You can explore the culture and nightlife of Capitol Hill and the Central District, or you can get gritty in the up-and-coming White Center and Georgetown areas, or Columbia City, or you can even get bougie in the downtown Westlake Mall, or head across the floating bridge to the swanky suburb. There's kind of something for everyone. Some areas are much more walkable, to the shops, restaurants, and groceries nearby, while other areas will require you to have a vehicle or using public transportation to get around. Which brings me to the next topic of public transportation. It's fairly easy to get around the city if you decide not to have a car. There's King County Metro for the bus system. There's Sound Transit Link light rail to get you into the city if you live in the surrounding suburbs or outside the city proper, which as we speak is being extended to even further out from Seattle. And with there being so much water around the city, it's one of the few areas in the country where they have passenger and vehicle ferries that you can take to get across the water. Here in Seattle, you take those to get across to Olympic Peninsula or the multitude of San Juan Islands in the area. There's also the Victoria Clipper that you can actually take from Seattle and go all the way up to Victoria, BC, up in Canada, which is pretty great. The ferry ride across the Strait of Juan de Fuca is pretty amazing. Last time we did it, we saw some whales. We saw they call them pod of dolphins next to the ferry. It's pretty amazing. Sometimes it's just fun to jump on a ferry for a scenic day trip to someplace new as well. And for getting around the city, there's also a variety of electric bikes and scooter sharing options. So some of the cons of Seattle, some of the downside maybe, is because Seattle is such a desirable area to live in, the cost of living is fairly high here. It's actually 72% higher than the national average, to be exact. And I break this down and cover it in more detail in my last video on the cost of living in Seattle. The Department of Housing and Urban Development says that a family of 4 has to make over $72,000 a year to be considered, to not be considered low income in Seattle. For a single person living in Seattle, the low income threshold is $50,000 a year, or roughly $24 an hour for a 40-hour per week employee. As far as what constitutes low income, typically that's considered to be 80% of the median household income for a region. So for Seattle, the median household income is $93,000 a year. Part of that high cost of living are the home prices. At the time of recording this, in January of 2022, the median sale price for residential homes in Seattle is $762,000. But on the plus side, because wages in Seattle are so much higher than the majority of the rest of the country, and home values continue to increase, meaning the homeowners get the advantage of building their equity and wealth through the vehicle of owning their own home. So they'll do that much faster here than you might in other countries that have more modest home prices or more modest housing value increases. On the downside, also Seattle also has a fairly high sales tax of 10.25% in the Seattle area. Washington sales tax by itself is 6.5% of that. And back to the weather. So rain, gray, drizzly weather in the winter and spring and fall. But the summer here are to die for. They're amazing. That's what I always try to focus on when people are all gloomy during the drizzly times of the year. You always have the summer to look forward to, and that's absolutely amazing and a great time to live outside during those 3 months. It's also worth noting that because it doesn't get that hot here, because the climate's fairly mild, very few houses actually have AC, which I know it's hard to fathom if you live pretty much anywhere else in the country where it gets ridiculously hot and humid in the summertime. People, for some, the Seattle freeze could also be a negative if you aren't willing to make the first move to meet new people and make new friends, but some people may just want to be left alone, so maybe you could move this con up to the pros if you don't want people to interact with you. Traffic. Seattle traffic is pretty notorious. Granted, it's not as bad as some big cities like Los Angeles or New York. It's a little more manageable than that level, but also a lot of it really depends on what time of day that you need. If you have a flexible schedule, you can travel during the non-peak traffic times, and it's really not that bad. I use the app Waze, which is great because you can actually say, hey, it takes the traffic analysis and shows you the best time to leave if you're planning out your drives. If you take public transportation, you can sometimes be faster since so many bus routes in the area have dedicated bus lanes, that if you take public transportation, sometimes this can actually be faster even though they stop more. A lot of the bus lanes around here are dedicated, so only the buses can go in them. One of the biggest cons of living in Seattle is really the homelessness, mental illness, and drugs issue that we're having. This one's certainly a downer and probably the biggest challenge that Seattle currently faces. There are a ton of taxpayer money, going towards the issue. To be exact, there's $156 million slated to be spent on the homelessness epidemic in 2022, and there's lots of great nonprofits that are working to alleviate this problem and help the homeless. The epidemic seems to only be getting worse. Seattle has the 3rd highest homeless population, only behind New York and Los Angeles, and it has increased by 30% since 2010. That's a downer, but it tends to be isolated to more the central downtown core, and it seems like the public officials are doing more to address the root cause of that, and also the public nuisance and safety issue of it. Moving on to our last kind of con, if you will. It's important to understand the difference between living in the suburbs and living in the city. I put this under the cons section because there's such a wide variety of different areas and neighborhoods that have different feels. You really want to make sure you have an idea of what sort of lifestyle you're after when you move here. I've seen too many people that first moved here and thought that they would love the suburbs, only to find that it was too quiet for them, and they spent all their time driving into the city on the weekends for entertainment and to visit friends, or sometimes vice versa. They moved to the city and it's a little too noisy, a little too bustling for them, and so they wanted to move them and their family out to the suburbs where it's a little quieter and they can maybe get a little more land and not be right up next to their neighbors. Lastly is politics. If you lean progressive or liberal, you'll likely love living here and fit right in, but if you lean conservative or even moderate, you'll probably find yourself drawn more to the suburbs. There's a whole lot more I could say about the political climate here in Seattle, but I'm just going to leave that alone and let you do your own research and figure that out for yourself. So thanks for tuning into this video. I hope it was helpful, sharing some of the pros and cons. Overall, Seattle's a great place to live. I love it. The quality of life here is absolutely amazing. So if you enjoyed this, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends or anyone that is looking to maybe relocate here or move to Seattle.